Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome, Helen. So we wanted to do a fun conversation today because, well, for many reasons, and one is because Helen worked with me on the Intuitive Business Transformation Program way back in, I want to say 2017. Is that right?
I think 2019 was the
2019.
first time I did it. Yeah.
So 6 years ago, today is April the 3rd, 2025. We started working together back in 2019. And I think from a business perspective, Helen, if it's all right with you, I would love to unpack that journey a bit today because there's so many gems and jewels, and it's such a beautiful, like real life story of how we change and grow and what our fears or the enemy sometimes tells us versus what's real and what is possible for us. And I think there are a lot of people that would be really fascinated by someone who starts in a place like, let's look at the A to B, right? So the A starting point was afraid to invest in a course that might potentially prosper you
Mm.
because money's tight and it's scary and it's a leap of faith, but you're feeling the knowing. And at that time, I know you were an actress and you were a working actress and you were getting work, but it was a bit intermittent. And so you were doing kind of like a side hustle. And that's where it kind of opened this door for you to go further. And we'll talk more. Well, I'd love to just for you to unpack that time. So the A starting point, I'd love for you to share more about that. And then how does someone go from, you know, really being so scared to invest and almost wanting to kind of get a refund just to get the money back, to then investing 5 years later, 4 years later, in my highest offering, like my 50K year long program, and then doing it again, by the way. So it's like, what is that journey? What happened to you in those 4 or 5 years that transformed everything so much? And where are you now at point B? And what I would love us to do is I'm going to take notes because I think it's fascinating. And I'm going to listen with like, innocent ears of I want to extract the juice out for people that need faith and they
Mm.
need to believe this is possible for them and not think such and such is set apart for any reason, because I'm sure you had those thoughts in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'd love to just go step by step and unpack the lessons and the gems and the takeaways that can just shore up people's faith and confidence, that that transformation and growth is possible, and that not everything online is a scam. I know that we have both experienced the dark side of being, we've both been scammed, full disclosure, and lost money. And it's very painful and upsetting. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of us also, it's like people that with Christianity who are very church hurt. And so it stops them believing in Jesus. There are people who are very like coaching industry hurt, and it stops them believing that this type of work and transformation works and that it's possible. And so, if you have a story like that, I hope that maybe today this is going to rewire some of that for you and show you that actually there are really caring people in the church and there are not so caring people in the church. There are loving people in the coaching industry and there are not so loving people in the coaching, like in every industry, in every, none of us are perfect people, but in every industry there are people that are really well meaning and providing a lot of value, and there are people that are using it and exploiting it and don't have their heart in the right posture for service. Okay. So, with all that being said, let's just start off with. I mean, does that sound good to you? Is there anything else that you
Sounds
wanted
great.
to go to today, or anything else you felt on your heart that you wanted to say?
Um, just, well, I'm just feeling how exciting my life is now. And just came off some really interesting meetings yesterday, today, and this is just not what my life was like before. Even if those things were happening, there was just such contraction in my system. And so yeah, I'm very much feeling the A and B today, especially. So it's good chance to talk about it. Yeah, so if I start In 2019, I was a different person in many ways. I grew up in London. My dad had been middle class, but all the money had been lost when he was a child, and so he was used to being broke. And my mum was really working class and lived in a two-bedroom council flat with her two brothers sharing a room, one of whom was disabled in a wheelchair, had to do her homework in the street. Um, she so I grew up with a really kind of constricted view of money and lack and there not being enough and sort of weird rules about it and no financial education. And then and I always wanted to be an actor. I was passionate about people, about the arts, about telling stories. And both my parents are creative. And I had this idea that money was what bad people did and greedy people did, and like good people were poor and were interested in like helping the world and helping people. And all of that was really unhelpful. And I was always been really driven by the power of story to connect people and help people shift in the world. And I've always been passionate about transformation and doing good and being of service. But I couldn't work out how to earn money, which I resented and didn't really want, but was always in struggle. And as well as acting, because of some opportunities I had in 2008, I had a sort of parallel career, which was in coaching in business. But my main focus and my main identity was being an actor. And then through a spiritual awakening in 2014, I then started importing ceremonial grey cacao, but that was just to hold ceremony and then sell to people. And I wasn't doing it as a money making thing. And I didn't have that kind of head on my shoulders. And then I was in my 30s living in a flat share that I'd been in for 11 years in 2019. And I was in a big relationship where I'd fallen madly in love, having had a lot of trauma through relationships in the past. And so didn't think I would ever have this in my life again. And he was a healer and really worse than me with money. And I heard you talking to somebody on a podcast who I rated, who I did a lot of spiritual work with. And I thought, oh, she's sold out. She's talking to somebody about money. And I listened because I was sort of intrigued, not to find out about money, but to find out why she was talking to you about business. And for me, business meant money. And I can't remember anything you said, but I remember just this feeling that I'd only had a few times in my life that I was meant to contact you. And I remember cycling to my boyfriend's house and calling you on my headphones because I was always in the spin. I was never still. And you talking to me, and and it was I don't say the amount, it's £1,500 for your discounted version to invest in this course. And I was like, I had so many blocks. I'd never spent that amount of money in my life. And I was like, no, no, no. I didn't have an identity as somebody who would spend that kind of money and on me. And I didn't really understand why I was doing it, just following this feeling. And you said, well, you could do it in 3 installments of 500. And I had the money in my bank. And you said, put down a deposit now and we'll do the first month. And if you're not enjoying it, I'll refund you. And I thought, well, I could do it all in the first month. I could watch all the videos, do the first month of live calls, miss the final 2 months of live calls, but I would have got all the content. And then I can get my refund. And then I'll see if it's any good or not. And so I said yes, with that as my kind of like back burner, making me feel a bit safe that I could get out of it. And I was cycling to my boyfriend to actually give him a bag of lentils because he'd run out of money for food. And he was in his 40s. So that was my life. And then I started doing this course with you, and there were shaman on it, and there were creatives, and there was a nurse, and I'd never done any personal development like this. I'd done Let's All Go to the Jungle or a teepee and I was teaching business development, but I wasn't overlaying it on my life. And then the magic happened. And you didn't even send me automated things asking for the money. And I was like, I could get away with not paying and do the whole thing. But because I valued it and because the work worked, I was like, why would I cheat myself out of this? And of course, I will give you the money. And something really deeply shifted in that time about my identity and broke down barriers about how I saw myself as an artist and a creative in the world, and how it wasn't so, this bit wasn't so clear then, but I'd othered myself from a lot of things that in the system, and I saw myself as an anarchist and a pattern disruptor, which I still feel I am. But that didn't need to mean I also needed to be broke and hate money. And so things changed. And then I came back and did it again the next year. That was very different because and then I think the year after that we had a one-to-one, and you said, look, Helen, why are you messing around? Like, we should do some deep work together. And that scared me, but I was flattered and thought,
Let
oh,
me
she
just
sees
pause
me
you
as
there one
somebody.
sec, because I think there's big and big. So this is, so let's say you did 2019, 2020,
Mm.
2021. Did you retake it within 2 years or three? I think it must have been you recycled it, like you did it because we launched again a couple of times, didn't we?
Yeah, I did it in 2019 when it was weekly, and then I did it in 2020 in the lockdowns when I think it was
Right.
monthly.
Right. Yes.
And at that point, I had a lot more going on. My mum had just died, the relationship had ended.
Yeah.
Obviously, the lockdown stopped all my income. I had to generate
You
things
make
in a
that
new way.
happen. Yeah. So let's just pause there one sec. So what were some of the barriers and the blocks? There's obviously that story about being othered from money, like it's somehow not being for you,
Yeah,
um, or for people like you. So there was an identity in there. Let's just double click on that for a moment. So I think this is
yeah,
important for anyone. We might have an identity of like, we're an artist, or we're a nurse, or we're a musician, or we're a this, that, or the other. Okay. And what those labels can sometimes do is confine us, isn't it? To
yeah,
say, well, then it's not for me. Or even like, I'm a libertarian, I'm left wing, I'm, working class. Like we
yeah,
put these labels on and they give us an identity which then others us from some of the things that deep down we know we need or we would like, but it's a very deep stronghold. So I just want to take a moment for anyone who's struggling with that. Let's just let's just break that stronghold in the name of Jesus for a moment. Like I just want to like drill in there for 1 minute, just if anyone is ready to just lay that identity down and receive that their real identity is as a child of God, then may that come to pass in Jesus' name right now. Okay, I just want to say that because look how we did a lot of work in that time. We worked on your offers, your ideal client, the selling conversation, how to package your services, how to value your time. We did money mentality work. We did so much work. But the thing that's coming out that we reflect back on now is that your identity needed to transform.
mm,
And that being kind of like the biggest barrier and also the biggest blessing when you let that go, when you gave that to God and was like, actually, I am who you say I am, not what the world has labeled me as, or not what I think I am.
mm.
That was that freedom, right? I think I saw you starting to get free at that point where veils were dropping.
And money was such a, 'cause it was never about how much was in the bank, because I never knew, like the longest I knew, by a long way, the longest I knew how much I was going to get paid was 6 months when I was in the West End. And other than that, your jobs would be a day. They would be, as a corporate coach, there'd be a day, there'd be the, and I saved everything because I always assumed nothing would ever come in again. So but I never felt wealthy. I never felt I had enough. I never felt safe. And I also saw people who made money or knew those things, and it wasn't so clear. I had to spend a long time exploring it, but as other, and that it would be if I was spending time in that space or learning about those things, I was somehow letting slip or not tending to my creativity and my service work, which I'd put in a different camp. And so I didn't understand that finances and having a financial education or an energetic understanding of money or a spiritual connection to money was possible or a good thing, right? It seemed like
Right,
an afterthought, like pensions or mortgages or stuff that was for the people in the system who had money. And
right.
it didn't feel like there was a bridge to that that I could cross while still being me. It would felt like I'd have to sell out and become a VA or be a coach in a company and not be an actor, not run a theater company, not, and I was a
Not
Buddhist,
be creative.
vegan, eco warrior, like, charity shopping, creative, cycling around London at a million miles an hour, never had a night in, didn't sleep much. That was like, buying all the reduced food in the supermarket, making all my salads and my stews and vegan stews, and yeah, like I had lots of strong identities, and none of them correlated with money. They were all quite anti-money in some ways. I mean, not that Buddhists or vegans have to be, but that was
No,
what
but
I had attributed it to.
and I'm curious what you would say to that version of yourself now. Like, is there a message you would want to give on your heart to her? Because I love what you said. No amount of money actually made you feel safe.
Mm,
And I think that people think money will make you feel safe. No, feeling safe will make you feel safe. Money would just make you
yeah,
money. And so until we do that deep work to feel safe, we won't feel safe no matter how much money we make.
absolutely. And funnily enough, I was coaching people in business who had lots of money, and I wasn't seeing things that I was looking for, which was safety, which was abundance. And I think lots of people don't see great role models of people with a lot of money doing great things in the world, but there's lots of examples of the opposite.
Mm, true.
And I think money magnifies who we are rather than changes who we are. But if we can do our growth work and increase our capability to hold and move more money, that's what I've seen the change in me, because it's having more and being able to create more money in ways that are aligned and mutually beneficial has allowed me to understand myself at a deeper level and appreciate myself more and realize that most of the choices I make, I'm proud of. And
So
that wasn't
the
something I
things
could
that
see.
that version of you was afraid of, that it would contaminate you somehow, were
Mm,
such lies. Because actually,
the
who
opposite's
you were
true too.
being then, when you thought you were being a good person, was the woman that was gonna take the course, take everything she could, steal it, and ask for her money back and think that she was good because
Yeah,
she was not. But I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying that to underline how quite often we live in a world where the enemy will put this lens on our eyes where we make good look bad and bad look good. And it's like
yes,
we think we can be good people. We think we can get to heaven by works. We think that we can, attain something spiritually if we're good. And then we decide, we use our own judgment, not God's judgment, what is bad.
yeah,
And sometimes that is the thing that limits us the most, our like value system that is corrupted. And it's not our fault. There's a naivety in it. There's an innocence because
mm,
your heart was right. You were seeking to be a good, loving woman. But the actions, because you were actually inside feeling unsafe and experiencing lack and scarcity, and it's all you'd known, and it was generational, your
mm,
actions were actually playing out in a way that made you somebody that wasn't actually contributing to the solution in a way that I know you probably feel you much more are now, and feel much more in the flow of the solutions of life rather than stuck in the limitations of life. Is
yeah.
that true?
So true.
Yeah, I feel like
So
that's
true.
part
And
of this,
even
like,
though I don't think I ever would have acted on getting the refund,
no, it's what you needed to tell yourself
it
to make
was the
yourself feel
my what
safe.
I needed to say in order to feel safe.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's those stories and those narratives that keep us so blinkered from opportunity
Yeah,
and keep us kind of one foot in and one foot out. And I think, when I work with you one to one and why I continued doing that and renewed for a second year, etc., was because then I had both feet, I burnt the boats, right? I was like all in, because that's how I, in other areas, in sort of spiritual growth and creative practice, like it's by being all in that I know that the shift really happens.
yeah, yeah. And okay, so that message that you would say to your 30 something self might be
Yeah.
along the lines of, actually, everything you fear, the things that you're sacrificing now, if you continue to stay faithful to what you fear, they're actually going to become, you're going to become what you hate, right? Like, in some way,
I think I'd say you're so much more than you know yourself to be.
right?
And by making choices that don't necessarily make sense, but you feel pulled towards, you will expand and know yourself in different ways. And then you can offer more and help more people. And you're a much more multifaceted person than you are now. And you don't need boxes.
And we just don't believe that, do we? Until someone else sees it in us. And I think that's where
Mm.
mentoring comes in. It's such a valuable experience to be witnessed, to be seen for more than we're seeing ourselves as.
And I think that's why I love coaching, and that's why I've got so much from you. And I think why it's so powerful in the UK, because we have a very different psychology to like the US, where we often look, this false modesty or this diminishing of ourselves or this talking down or this not showing off or not. So we're constantly undermining and sabotaging ourselves in our very natures to not be seen as being too much or greedy or over the top. And so, which is all false lies. But if you have someone who's constantly seeing the potential in you and pulling you, guiding you, coaxing you towards that and acting from that place, like that's what I found so healing. And that's what I hadn't experienced before. And I had parents who were very scared and coming from fear, who were constantly not wanting me to take risks and trying to
Right.
talk
So
me
you
out
needed
of
someone to take
taking
a
big
stand.
choices.
This is so interesting because did you see the interview with Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley? Did you watch that Diary of a
I
CEO interview?
saw some of it. I haven't finished it.
There's a moment where Gary Economics is like, "You are sick, Daniel."
Oh,
I mean,
really?
don't get me wrong. I absolutely love Gary Stevenson, and I think he's right, and I respect him, and I love that he's on a mission and has a backbone and is standing up for what he believes. But I think the nuances there is that it's not either or, right? Like, he was
Mm.
like, "You are sick, Daniel. How can you tell people to be more entrepreneurial and to work their way out of poverty?" But
Yeah.
when we look at your journey, that's exactly what you did.
Mm.
Um, and so I think that there has to be an and in that conversation. Is like, yes, we need to tax the super rich. And I think it needs to be almost a kind of legacy, almost like an offering that is something for their egos. Like, you guys have got this superpower, you get to pay a super tax. Not you have to, you get to.
Yeah.
And then sell it to them on the benefits of, like, if you pay 1%, 10% of your income, or your assets, because it's not about taxing income, it's about taxing what you own. These are the benefits you're going to provide to humanity, to your community, to the country, to the earth.
But then I think what the shift in the conversations that I hear about people who are in that wealth bracket is that they see the lack of strategy, the lack of foresight, 'cause they have entrepreneurial minds in government. So they see the money and the wastage, and so they think they can use it more wisely. Oh, there's greed. But I think it needs to be systemic. Yes, I think those taxes are important, but then I think how that money is used, there needs to be changes in the system so it goes to where it's needed and it doesn't go to their mates' pockets and people see fundamental change. I was at this amazing dinner I was invited to last week, which is one of the crazy benefits of things that have been moving recently. And there was a speaker there. It was all about philanthropists and visionaries for the future. And there was a speaker there who said that 100, and I followed this up and it's true, 198 billion pounds is in the stock market that belongs to charities, trusts, and foundations. So rather than all that money that they've raised going into helping people, it's just sitting there making them more money. And it's like, I understand that there's a percentage of that that makes business sense to keep the machine viable. But think about like the good that can be done with 15K with someone who knows how to use it wisely. And it's 198 billion. And that's just this country. Like, I think this needs to be a
And so
movement.
that is going back to the argument that Daniel Priestley makes on that podcast, which is we all need entrepreneurial skills. Like we need to
Yeah.
understand money, we need to not be afraid, and we need to make it work in our lives, and we need to develop ourselves. And if you weren't taught it, and I wasn't, you know, you do pay for a seat at the table. That is true, but you can work your way up. Because let's go back. So you made your payments, you finished the course, you started to see some fruits in your life. Right. Let's go
Yeah.
back to that first intake. What did the first sort of 3 months give you? Just back those small seeds, those small steps in the beginning that gave you the confidence to then join again and kind of keep on.
I think it was that it was a shift in my inner status in the world. I didn't see myself so much as a kind of outsider Oliver type Dickensian, please sir, give me some more, but a sense of I can be a creative creator that involves money rather than just being a creator that is a starving artist archetype. And that the cacao ceremonies or the business and all of that could be it was okay to give myself permission to make that work in a business sense as well as a healing space because it was creating good and people were getting a lot from it and that any kind of division or murkiness between service and being paid, I lost that, and consequently I made different decisions and became I was already having spreadsheets and keeping tracks and inventory but that was all coming from a place of fear. And I think I then was able to just imbue it with grace and positivity and enjoy the process more rather than my nervous system being like every time I had to do
So
anything
you developed
financial.
at that time a warmer sense around your practices with money. And for someone who's just starting out, what were and are to this day some of the ways that you treat money? You know, what are some of those things that you do? Some of those habits?
I give to charity that I believe in. I partner with foundations and things like that, but I give regularly. Whenever I tell myself if I see someone in need or doing a fundraiser, I don't tell myself I can't afford it. I know more will come if I invest in things that are need where it's needed. I um am grateful for what I have. Twice a day, I pray with gratitude before I ask for anything. Um, and I really understand gratitude not as an academic, like writing my list, because actually I'm unhappy and I want more, but from an actual like vibrational state of like being able to weep with what I have, um, even before things change, like starting to understand that and not being resentful of bills, not being resentful of spending. And I've always loved giving presents, but I used to try and find ways to give them that didn't cost much. Now I've just got much more generous, um, much more generous and less scared of spending money.
Yeah. And do you track what's coming in and going out?
I have a great accountant who I pay a lot of because I now have like multiple companies, but I have for savings and investments. I have my own, yeah, I have, and I quarterly go through that and I check interest rates and I'm getting more complicated in how I because I've built up my sort of money muscles. I'm now more strategic and more complex in how I invest and how I'm using what I now have. But then it was just how do I make the most of it? And I only knew about interest rates. I didn't really understand any of the other financial tools there are then, but I still have those spreadsheets and I just have grown them and used them. And that's my own things. And I also just think the way that digital banking has changed is it's much easier and it's much more friendly now to have an app on my phone or multiple apps than it was to go and queue up at the bank and talk to somebody in an ugly uniform about with words I didn't understand and
Yeah,
using technology to go, what does this legal term mean? And what does that legal term mean?
yeah, yeah, using ChatGPT or whatever to
Yeah,
understand what's
exactly.
really being said. Yeah, great tips. Okay, so let's go back to your journey because I think people are starting to understand the flavour of where point B might have ended up. But let's go back. We're probably on point Z. We're probably here right in the early stages. You're starting to transform. Your identity's starting to shift. Were there particular other results at that time, or was it more internal?
At that time, it was much more internal. Um,
So there's still
and it
an
was when we did more
element
of the
of
one
faith
to,
there.
sorry.
Well, I'm saying there's still an element of faith then, because you actually had to be patient. You weren't actually seeing massive financial results yet, but you felt different inside.
I
Is
felt
that right?
different. I think at some point within those 2 years, I started negotiate better rates for some of the work I was doing. Um,
Okay.
but that came from a much more easy place of looking at how I could create value and rather than a neediness, which is quite a repulsive energy when you're asking for more money. Um, but then my own work within my own company, I started to value myself differently and turn up differently and value the work differently and understand the transformation differently, partly coinciding with having done it for a much longer period of time, having more results that I was seeing of how that was playing out, and also the growth within myself um, through this work, through the deepening of my spiritual practice, through um, the deepening of the life experiences, the medicine of grief, of losing a parent, like all of these. And something that was very poignant actually was on my mum on her deathbed, because she was given 8 weeks to live. She said to me, when are you going to get a proper job? And that really hurt because she'd never said that before. And I was like, I've got a proper job. Like, I've got a mission. I've got a career. And I coach people in businesses who earn loads of money. That's proper, isn't it? But there was some seed in that where she knew where I felt like I don't have safety and I don't have security, and many ways I was working against that, but it planted a seed in me that it was something around it's time to grow up in terms of not necessarily conform or change who I intrinsically am, but mature in my understanding of providing for myself in the world.
Yeah. Wow. She'd be so proud to see you now.
Thank you.
You got a proper job, Mom. We're on it.
Lots of jobs, got lots of jobs now.
Yeah.
Um,
Many hats.
many hats, exactly.
The
Um,
way. I think she's probably at peace with that. Because I mean, what there was a lot of love in that, really. However, it was communicated. It was, you want to make sure you
Yeah,
get
and she was,
livelihood.
in her last days, she was in a very gentle space. I didn't feel it as an attack, but it was a truth I needed to hear, and I was in a vulnerable space, and so I could hear it without my usual resistance, which I had to a lot of anything my parents said. I'd always been, um, it was difficult to parent. So yeah, but it really was needed. And actually her death unlocked a lot of things that I was able to transform that wasn't possible when she was on the planet. And just sharing that in case anyone's fearful of losing parents. Yes, it's hard, but it's also there's a deep transition that happens in that time that I think unlocks our lives a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so this is now like you're in this community, you're in this work, things are shifting inside, things are changing outside, but they're big things, tectonic plates like parents dying and ending of relationships, things falling away. I know you moved at that point as well. I remember when we were doing the calls, you came on and had a completely different background suddenly, and you were like, I've moved. Um, that was a leap because I know you'd always been in London and you moved to the sea.
Yeah.
So let's check in with you at that point. So if you can just sort of kind of go back in time in that time machine, just see if you can remember some of those takeaways. Like, where was the aha moment? Where did things start to shift financially for you?
I think leaving London and where I'd been for 11 years was huge. A huge identity was attached to being a Londoner, and I'd always lived in zone one, right in the center. And so in 2020, was swimming in the sea in Greece between the lockdowns, and I just had this knowing that I needed to see the sea from my window every morning. And I had no idea where I was going. I handed my notice in my flat I'd rented for 11 years. And I just started looking between Ipswich and Wales about what I could afford, where I could see the sea. And then I saw this view and I was like, that's where I'm moving to. And then I looked where it was and I'd never been there before. I didn't know anyone there. And I went to view this flat and I was allowed to be the person out of whoever was viewing it to rent it. And it was such an upgrade. The environment from what I could afford in London, it was more, but it was a couple of £100 more. But I went from living in a living room, looking at a brick wall, to having a two-bed apartment overlooking the sea with huge ceilings. And that environment allowed me to have a different identity of myself. And I think paved the way, and also stripping away so many of the distractions and habits and patterns I'd had about where I shopped or how I lived or how I spent money, um, to being much more open to your suggestion about doing deeper work when that came, I think, 4 or 5 months later. Because I was also not surrounded by people who saw me in a certain light or had a certain identity, and I could reinvent myself. And I think that really helped. And I am a huge proponent, as I know you are, about the power of environment to help
Yes.
you elevate.
Yes,
Um,
and sometimes that slight stretch, that slight leap before you're really ready, but you know it's right.
yes. And I helped a client with that very thing yesterday. With you don't make the choice once you have the evidence or the money that it's there, you make it before it's easy, because that's what facilitates huge growth,
Yeah,
and the
with
results
discernment, but
coming.
it's sort of the only way. It's that leap of faith, and then things stabilized a lot, didn't they? You had that big jump, and then things really settled when you lived there, and you sort of found your a new flow.
Um, Found a new flow, and I'm just going to plug my laptop in. Excuse my
Okay.
technology and being unprepared. Um, so things shifted. Looking at the horizon every day just gave me a different perspective, energy, feeling in my body. And then I had built up a company. I was working hard. But I wasn't financially where I wanted to be. And I still didn't feel fully safe, that I could sustain what I was doing. And then when we started to work together for the third time, but one to one for the first time, everything moved so fast.
I think
And
that's so you did IBT for the third time alongside some private sessions. Was that what happened?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. And I think the big shifts in me, like the grief of my mum and all of that, had started to kind of be less like a roller coaster. The move had I'd been there, I think I'd been there 7 months or something. So I'd started to ground, as much as you can being by the sea. And and then things moved really fast, and I earned so much more in 1 month than I'd ever earned
I
doing what I
remember,
loved.
I remember that one.
And I was so giddy by the possibility of life and who I was and what I was doing. And where I thought then I was dreaming crazy big. And I've now kind of done those things. And now my visions are much bigger, but they feel. I have moments when I'm like, oh, Helen, but then something huge will happen, an extraordinary left field, and it's that which I think is beyond finance and everything. It's that evidence that life is beautiful because we're given so much narrative that the opposite is true. And I'd lived a lot of reality where the opposite was true. And so to suddenly feel that I had agency without needing complete linear plans or anything, but an opening in my soul, in my field into what is possible to create and have, and also deeply feeling supported by you was such medicine because I'd always felt like I had to do everything on my own. And I think as women, especially, that can not be helpful for our ability to create when we feel like we're doing everything by ourselves.
Yeah, it's that safety thing again.
Mm.
I think you have this total powerhouse in you, and it wasn't fully out because you weren't feeling completely safe. And so the
Mm.
more safe you felt, the more it was able to come forward and to completely change things. You really, I think I really saw you step into your power at that point. And once you did the one financial windfall that month where you made more in a month than you had in a year, just for anyone curious, it's because you launched a program, right? You launched a
Um,
container.
was that was later actually. That first
That was
big
later.
month wasn't more than I'd made in a year, but it was like the most profitable month I'd ever had as an actor was 5 times more money than I normally earn in a month. And then this was almost double that.
Right.
And then when I made more in a month than I'd made in a year, that was because I launched a program.
And that was a couple of months later.
That was January. That was
Okay,
the
so you
January.
made the big
That was like,
investment in yourself to do the one-to-one, and you had a really good month quickly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then a couple of months into working together one-to-one, that's when you launched the bigger container.
That was when I went into the year because we did 3 months and then you
Hmm.
offered me a year and I freaked
Hmm.
out and was like, I was very flattered, but I was like, she sees that much potential in me. Ah, and and also the money scared me a lot
Mm.
because it was like a huge. I didn't have a huge amount invested in, and it was everything, and I hadn't bought a property then or anything, and then I went in and said yes because I knew I was going to. I just had to ride my chaos in my mind was telling me, and I didn't tell anybody else because I didn't want anyone to sort of talk me out of it. I think I told one mate, and then yeah, and then that first month. I made more in a month than I'd made in a year.
And that probably settled things a lot, but there was probably still some doubts and fears. And then you did it a second time. So what happened in that year? How do you sum up your takeaway from that? What did you learn in a year of coaching at that level of that investment?
In many ways, that was the best year of my life because having a mentor, having a coach, having that level of support, which had never had a healthy relationship. The parenting I was raised with gave me a lot of skills and strength about how to do things on my own. And I was missing I was missing a lot of love. Um, and I was missing a lot of championing, really, um, that that allowed me to really believe in myself and that belief to be intrinsic, not extrinsic. So an internal belief rather than a I can do this, come on, Helen.
Pushing.
And uh and it seemed, and I learned how to surrender to life birthing things through me rather than everything having to be driven and pushed and hustled and grinded um into making things happen. And I was so nourished by the feedback and the results that people were getting from my work, because that, not only because I was investing in myself at such a level, what I was seeing facilitate through what I was doing also massively expanded. And so
Yeah.
it was a win-win. It wasn't like I was off on my own having all the fun. And
Well,
and that
also
was really
it's
exciting.
scary for people to think, I don't want to raise my rates because I'll get refunds or people will hate me. And so it's not just more
Yeah.
money, is it? It's happy clients and strong results and feeling that you're
Yeah.
making a difference, and the transformation gets bigger and more like you really enjoy it. And so that's a very important takeaway, I think, as well for people to hear.
Yeah. And also just that sense of deeper self-esteem in myself, and how I was able to tend to myself and look after myself, and the other support. I'd always wanted a personal trainer. I then gave myself permission to have a personal trainer, things like that, which I always sort of, that's for other people. Only eating organic food most of the time, it's for other people. Like all these like really core values of mine around health and wellness, I was able to really meet those needs. And
Yeah.
they're just like, it's 20 quid a week for me to get a box of organic veg, but like I dismissed that from what I was entitled to. So those things aren't huge shifts, but they were for me in terms of the quality that they improved my life and how much I was actually spending to have them and things. And then the results of that, like the sort of men that were attracted to me, like everything elevated. I wasn't needing to cycle around giving people bags of lentils.
Yeah.
I had a holiday and I
It's
went
that,
backpacking in Mexico, and
yeah.
um, yeah, like it was a really nourishing growth spurt for me as a person.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And so point B, for anyone wondering, where are you now? What's your financial status? What are you up to? Tell us the truth about how it is for you. Because listen, I mean, I think it's important to say, when you did the first year of the diamond level coaching program, you didn't have a flat, you didn't have
Didn't
any
have a
guarantees,
car, didn't have
didn't
a
have a car,
bicycle.
and that was pretty much all of your money in cash that you had.
Yeah.
So you bet the house. Now,
I
okay, you'd
bet
had 3 years.
take it all and change me is kind of what my mentality was.
You'd
I
had
could
three
not
years
be a
on
gambling
Ramsey,
person being on the poker table going, someone on black 13.
and I mean that's brave. And I think it's obviously you had some evidence that's what helped. You had proof
Yeah.
that in your system that you'd made these leaps and they'd had been scary, but they'd felt right, and you'd done it, and you'd received results from doing
I
it.
had a deep faith in God, my intuition, like when these, and I'd done it several times in different realms, and getting on the plane to go and sit in jungles or whatever it might be, where these things that made no logical sense, I felt like, you know, God's foot on my bum going that way. And no matter how much my ego self would go, I kind of, it was like that was happening to me. And I felt that about needing to say yes to you. So that feeling I trusted. And I just had to really look after my nervous system when the very real voice of that's your pension, that's your deposit on the house, that's your sick pay, that's your
And
was
and so
there.
how did that come about? How did you, because now you're in your own flat and you have several properties and several
Yeah.
companies and millionaire status, right? Like, so how that was in 2 years. And I know some of that was obviously not through just business, but do you think that there was do you think that the way, life has blessed you is because of the ways in which your mindset has shifted and the ways in which you've transformed that inner game? I mean, a lot of people say success is 80% an inner game. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Um, and not only success, because that is, down to everybody has a different version of success, but I think fulfillment and satisfaction in, because there's no point having any amount of money if you're not on some level feeling fulfilled and satisfied in your life, because you'll always be chasing more. But yeah, those are the inner game that allow you to then create more from a healthy, nourished place, and also to have the resilience, because nothing is ever increasing. There's been huge moments of things shaking or things appearing to be lost or moving um or shifted. And then also like now the size of the leaps of faith I'm making are much bigger, and I'm still making them. I haven't just sort of decided to plateau or coast with the choices I'm making. Um, Not that that's wrong. That's right for some people. It doesn't feel right for me right now. So it's definitely an internal game, and it comes down to that gratitude piece. Like I could be sitting here because I'm also surrounding myself with many people who are, who are self-made, who have created more than I have, who are doing extraordinary things and setting up foundations and serving at a much greater scale. So I think it all comes down to be having gratitude for what you have, and that leading you into wanting to be able to do more because you can see how much more you can help and how good it can get, whether it's more for you, if you want a holiday house in the Bahamas or whatever, or if it's because you want to have more to be able to support and share or facilitate flying somewhere in the world to have a meeting with somebody about their charity when you can't afford to do that because you've got to be here, there, or other places. I don't know. It's just like my brain just works in a really different way than it ever did before. It's
Yeah,
looking for possibility, not for looking for like fear contraction.
yeah. Do you still get doubts sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny, I think I want to say that to people because I'm sitting here now, obviously, like a proud mother hen. And it's so validating for me because when you launch a course, when I launched IBT, I honestly thought, how am I going to teach people all these things inside of me that I have learned through literally spending, like I spent 6 figures on a coaching program for a year, and then there was lots of other things I did and invested in, and I'd always shared what I knew through high ticket mastermind mentorship private work. And the idea of putting it into an online course freaked me out so much because I just thought it won't work. Like, I'm on a Zoom meeting and it's weekly and it's recorded, and the people even going to watch it? Like, are they going to follow through and get the transformation through a video? And as much as I still love my high ticket work, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to give it up because it's so meaningful, like times like this, I also do know that the value is being able to access it at a lower price point. And so I'm sat here like a mother hen going, oh, you're a perfect example of like my ideal client, right? Like going through the staircase. It's kind of like what everyone teaches in digital online course creation, or, personal brand scaling with an elegant online business model. That is all about taking your knowledge, taking your value, turning it into products and services, and then having kind of tiers. And you're literally the living example of what that can look like. But even now, even today, I'm working on some offerings right now. I still doubt. I still get fearful. I still get confused or overwhelmed or think, you know what, I've got nothing to offer. What am I even doing again? And I want to say
Crazy.
that because I think people need to hear that, and I want to say that to me in 2017 when I created the course, is they like,
Yeah.
you know what, this is going to change someone's life. You can't not do this.
And it's so interesting because I was having an immersion day with a client yesterday, and she was saying she always felt, and I thought I was and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this because it's also what I felt. I'm so mad, I'm too much. And having you there who can listen and tell me I'm not and get it. And I'm like, yeah, because I think I'm far madder than any of my clients. I think, I don't know, like it's not a competition, but like the inner narratives that we tell ourselves that aren't true and the meaning we can give things that are so warped and so extra, like I think you can't do the work unless you've lived it. And if you stopped, you'd have to live with the same intensity. But if it all just stopped and it was all just easy, I don't think we'd be able to help in the same way. It's like you can't be a great actor unless you've gone through, you don't have to go through like huge trauma, but you have to be able to relate to people's pain in order to convey it. Um, Otherwise, like there's no authenticity, and we as humans are hardwired to suss out BS, right?
Yeah, and that's where these like chat GPT prompts scare me a bit, because you've got to teach from the heart, right? You've got to like, you kind of got to earn your chops a bit. I think your ministry is what you've been through, that you struggled with, that you solved, or that you figured
Yeah,
out, and that you understand it from an inward place, like a lived experience in the muscle. It's going to be
yeah,
very difficult for ChatGPT to replicate that, and I do worry about the PDF, that the big sort of boom right now in low ticket stuff. I'm worried that it might fatigue people who really genuinely are looking for transformation and think they can get it from a PDF. Doesn't really work
yeah.
like that. There has to be skin in the game, right? There has to be a kind of a transmission, and it's not, it's like the transactions also facilitate the transformations. There's some sort of energetic in those portals where it squeezes you through. It's like a birth canal, and you come out a little bit different, a little bit not the same person that you were before you stretched to make the investment.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it's a sort of pattern of yo-yo dieting because you can change the behavior, but if you don't you don't rewire inwardly, then you're in you're constantly in a place of dissatisfaction and self-recrimination because you're feeling like a failure or that you're unfixable or unchangeable, and that's why things are for other people and not for you. If you
And
Because
that's
most of
where
the
it does cause mental health problems. That's
yeah,
where Gary Stevenson is right. There is collateral damage there, because if you're investing in stuff that's a little bit soulless and that is not going to do the transformational work, and you think it will, and then you blame yourself, and it's like, actually you can't, like, mentorship is ancient. Apprenticeship and studying someone, you're better off going to work for free for an entrepreneur than you are consuming kind of endless content that makes you feel
yeah.
good for 10 minutes and then you crash.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think understanding the intention behind something. So I see a lot of things on social media which look like they're designed to create a lot of money quickly versus create a lot of transformation, maybe slightly slower. And I think, maybe they're not as profitable or you can't scale as much, but and I think there are amazing people like Joe Dispenza or Tony Robbins who really come from a deep lived place of transformation, and then there's some of the biggest scalers on the planet. So I don't think it has to be one or the other, but I think the intention of where that work is coming from, like anything, is paramount.
Yeah,
That makes
yeah,
sense. And I
so
think you
good.
really live
So
that,
good.
Kat, because I think you really care.
Thank you. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. It's very nice for my system to catch up with you, to honor you, to celebrate this, to share this with people. I feel like there's gems in here for anyone that needs it. We've all been there. We've all been in the struggle. That there's no shame. We have to start somewhere, but we just have to start where we're at. But there is a way through, and I think you and I are both living proof that it's not fake, that it's real, that the inner work does work, and it is necessary. You can't avoid it. You can
Yeah.
try. We used to have a saying, when someone invested in a program and then didn't make their payments or kind of tried to get a refund, we used to have a saying, you do the program or the program does you. Like if you make the commitment and then you back out or you talk yourself out of it, it works on you kind of anyway, because like there will be a price to pay. But I think that I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm just saying that there's like, it is powerful. It isn't easy. Anyone that says it's easy is lying. It takes a lot of courage, as you've seen with Helen's story, but it is doable. And I think it is about finding your right sort of environments, and that's come up. I think that's important, the right strategy for you, because you had some great skills there already with the acting and with working with circles, so all you really did was elevate and magnify that, right? We took what you already
Yeah.
had.
And I also was teaching a lot of business acumen, a lot of communication skills, and just, I took, I've taken what I think has been quite successful for me is taking stuff that was in the business world and taking it out of the business world and taking stuff that was in my circle work and putting it in the business world. And that cross collaboration in the same way is what it's kind of what I was doing was like, you know, taking my broadcast and putting it in a position of having money and taking like the money and putting it now in, you know, foundations or charities. And I think it was just breaking down all the boxes I had in my head
I
and the
feel like that's
lines.
what we're going to see on the planet. That's like the Gary economics and the Daniel Priestley conversation. It's like when those cross, if we take the government, you know, the corruption, the systems that are tyrannical out, the limiting stories, the belief systems, the oppressive systems and narratives, if we take them out, and then we somehow kind of find this field that we all get to collaborate and give our gifts and things get to show equality, you know, it could be a really fresh time on the horizon. I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better for sure, and we have to go through some messy transformation, but I strongly believe we're going to flourish and come out the other side if we keep believing, keep our eyes, for me, on Jesus, on the prize. Jesus is the prize, but you know, the kingdom of heaven, however you want to call that. And if we live there, but we're in the world and not of it, and we bring our gifts, walking in that light, then you know we could, a way will be made in the wilderness, no matter how hard it looks in the UK these next few years. I know that I'm slightly, you know, buckling up for that, but it's these kind of conversations that give me encouragement and give me faith in a good God and trust in the unknown. And we don't need to exactly have that conversation right now, but I think it's an important moment just to end with, just to say, you know, keep your hope and keep your mind in a space where you can be renewed. Because if you just listen to the media and if you just receive what's kind of pushed it onto you, you know, I don't think you stand a chance to get that sort of transformation in your life. What do you think about that?
The reason I didn't continue with that podcast was because I thought there was too much naysaying and limitation and reinforcement of the narrative that there's lack. And there is, like, I'm not debating the reality of how hard things can be, and I've, you know, been there, but I don't think that's where the solutions come from. I think we need to acknowledge that there's a problem and not be rose tinted about it. But I don't think we should make it worse than it is. And I don't think we should underestimate human potential and the tools that we have these days, that everybody has a phone in their pocket, like, and the opportunity and things that can bring, and human ingenuity and creativity and our life force. And like, you know, one of my catchphrases is God's in the room. Like, we're not doing this alone. We're not been abandoned by that which created us. And so it's, life is supernatural. We're working with the supernatural. We're supernatural. And to not get limited by the bill we feel like we can't pay, or there not being enough food in the fridge because of, well, quantum physics and the field and the power of
We
prayer. But
walk
like,
by faith, not by sight.
exactly. And I believe that intrinsically most people are good and have a desire to help, especially
Definitely.
when you remove such a strong lack and fear narrative. So I'm hopeful about the future. I don't think life's easy. I don't think it's meant to be, but I also think it can be and is beautiful. And I think we don't value things we don't work hard for, and hard work can look different in different ways. But if everything is easy peasy, then we don't enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, it's so much sweeter when you've earned it, right? And
Yeah, when you've unlocked it, when you've understood it, when you've unraveled it, when you've decompressed it.
yeah, and also moments like this today, like to celebrate. It's financially great, but that's not really the point. It's who you become in
No.
the process. It's the happiness, the fulfillment.
Yeah, I mean, I could have as much money as I have now as I did then and still be equally as unhappy as I was then.
Yeah,
It's definitely about it's who you become on the journey, right? Not where you get to.
yeah, exactly. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank you for sharing
you.
so transparently. And I've yeah, I just pray this is healing for people watching. And I've been so honored to walk with you, Helen, these last years on your journey. And yeah, amazing. Keep going, keep doing what you're doing, keep being who you are, and God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Kat. So much gratitude for you and what you've, yeah, where we got to. So thank you, lots and lots of love, and lots of love to everybody listening. And I used to listen to things like that and see an otherness between me and them, but there isn't, there really isn't.
Yeah, let's get it. Let's get it. Come on, everybody. All right. God bless everybody. Much love. Love you. And take care. Bye for
Bye
now.
bye.
Bye.